First thing I would say is that I am, I believe, not an athlete, at least not in the classic sense of what I would consider an athlete to be. So essentially what I'm going to talk about tonight is why I think I've been able to compete and complete the 6633 when so many other people have failed to complete that and similar races. Before, though, I start talking about the specifics, a quick little bit about myself. My background is I started running specifically on the 2nd of February 2010 at the ripe old age of 43. Classic midlife crisis, shortly after a separation to be followed by a divorce. I'm sure a drunken bet came in there somewhere. So February 2010, finding myself single, slightly overweight and looking to change my life. I did what I now increasingly do. I found a race that looked appealing, the Forest of Dean Half Marathon, and signed up for it and thought, well, I better start training for it. That was 6 weeks after I started training. I managed to complete it in a reasonable time. I then joined a running club, managed to find myself competing in a race when I overheard somebody was looking for a volunteer because their partner had dropped out. So found myself doing something I didn't have a clue what it was until I got there. But it was a 2-day mountain marathon. So essentially running over the mountains in the Lake District in the north of England, navigating from checkpoint to checkpoint. Absolute hell on earth for the first day. But I seemed to find a second win the second day and actually really enjoyed it by the end. In October 2010, I ran my first marathon. So about 8 months after I started running, around the Chicago Marathon. Again, common theme, finding a race I like the look of, setting a goal, training hard. In most cases, not quite hard enough, but trying to graft it out. And in most cases, actually doing a reasonable job. The following couple of years, then I settled down a bit and tried to run just 2 or 3 races a year. Sort of trail marathons, off-road marathons and the like. I do run a couple of businesses, so my life doesn't allow me to compete in too many races, but so I picked and chose the races carefully. My first ultra was the Beacons Ultra in the autumn, I think October or November of 2012, and that was run at the time by Martin and Sue. Did that thing I was told not to do, picked a random target, about a third of the way down the field, seemed to be about 10-hour finish, so I set a target time for 10 hours. And I came in at 10 hours, 0 minutes and 13 seconds, which I was absolutely distraught and still remain distraught to this day because I've never had a chance to go back and rerun the race. So I missed my target by 13 seconds. Better to have missed it by half an hour, I think. But hey, there we go. I'll get back there one year. The following year, I developed plantar fasciitis, not really knowing what it was. I went to see a physio in the early autumn. Told him I had 2 races lined up, the Brecon Beacon or the Beacons Ultra again, and another 50-mile race. He said that to run one of them, I'd be mad and totally insane if I ran both of them. So I thought, well, I'm not insane. I'll just run the one. I ran the 150-mile race, but after that, I was in such a bad way. My plantar fasciitis meant I couldn't walk more than about 20 or 30 meters for the following kind of 6 months, really. And during that time in early 2014, I had a letter from Martin Like saying, would I like to run the 6633? My first reaction was, absolutely no way, I'm not worthy, can't do that kind of race. But nonetheless, picked up the phone to Martin, who convinced me in his inimitable way that the race is as much about planning and the mindset as it is about athletic ability. I was badly injured and could hardly walk, but decided what better way to make sure that I would get fixed up than to enter a ludicrously difficult race. Being a lover of mathematics, I worked out at that time only 17% of entrants had ever completed the race. I think that's increased slightly since then, but still a very low pass rate or completion rate. And I think that was the point at which my love affair with cold weather races started. So back to the point I started with, I'm not an athlete. I'm simply a slightly overweight, stubborn, middle-aged git who runs a couple of businesses and doesn't like to quit, who enters races that he's not really qualified to enter, and then does his level best to prepare for them so he doesn't fail miserably. I was truly terrified, as well as really excited entering the 6633, my first multi-day cold weather race. So my strategy, I will talk about now for my training and other bits and pieces. I'll be careful not to cover too much on training and clothing. I know Martin and Mark are both going to cover those, but I'll also talk about my food, my eating, my general systems and so on, and go through those with as much detail as I can in the time allowed. But essentially, through my sheer fear of failure, I tend to obsess. I form a plan and a very strong plan about how I'm going to run the race, how it's going to happen, but totally accepting the fact that in all probability, my race plans will change, and not just change once, but will change several times over. But I love going to a race, having a fully structured race plan. It gives me comfort. In advance, I would say to anybody that's entering one of these races for the first time, absolutely pick the brains of experts and those who have raced before. Their knowledge and experience is just invaluable. Create a strategy or a system for everything. So I'm going to go through a few of the areas that I think are really important for these races. Quickly at training, I say Mark's going to cover that in greater detail later on, but Martin produces a training schedule that I absolutely love and I follow pretty much to the letter. It starts off a lot of high energy sort of runs, and it gradually progresses to more and more longer back-to-back training sessions. It mixes it up just well enough for me, and I really love it. The beauty of the training that I've done is that I really always now try and train rather specific. So when I've run the Lakeland 100 mile or 105 mile, to be precise, race around the Lake District, I will run around the Brecon Beacons to get that hill fitness. But training for cold weather races, you are essentially walking probably up to 50 miles a day. And for me, the best training for that is simply to do long back-to-back training sessions throughout the Monmouthshire and Herefordshire countryside. I love the knowledge and the comfort with that 14-hour day, or a bit more if I can squeeze them out back-to-backs, knowing that I have a pace that is now very consistent, and even allowing for toilet breaks and food breaks and everything else. I know I do 12-minute kilometers, and that means that in 16 hours, I will achieve my 80 kilometers in a day. So that makes it very achievable, if not comfortable. And I know that I've done that in training. It's in the memory bank, and it can be achieved in the actual race. The other beauty of all the hours that are spent training, I found that I just plan and come up with lots of sometimes crazy ideas, sometimes great ideas, also picking the brains of people that have entered before. I found in my training that even in the UK, I would, winters, cold and damp, but I wasn't drinking enough. I'd wake up on the morning of day 2 of a long back-to-back, completely dehydrated, headachy, and kind of feeling hungover. I just wasn't really able to absorb or drink the water in my Camelback, and just didn't take any pleasure in drinking, just wasn't drinking enough. And then a little tip given to me by somebody, these very small bottles that you get of squash. very concentrated. One squirt in the Camelback gives you decent strength squash. 4 bottles is enough to do the 6633 or the Yukon Arctic Ultra. 1 bottle will fit happily inside the Camelback bag. And that just drinking squash made me drink enough and kept my hydration levels up. Added to that the use of salt sticks, then I found that and taking 6 salt sticks a day kept my hydration levels up perfectly and kept me in good form. Testing shoes and so on. Hoka shoes I grew to love for walking. The boots came out shortly before the 6633. I tried them. They failed miserably with me. They don't suit my ankles. But luckily I found that out before the race started. I conceived other little ideas, which quirky, you might say. When I'm walking along, I like to walk and eat. I walk with walking poles, of course, but there are times when you don't want your walking poles. So because I used fixed shafts on my pulk, I fixed a little loop to the lower end of the pulk shaft, so I can put my pole in there. A bungee at the top attaches it, so I can put my poles in there without having to undo my harness and put my poles on my pulk bag. And you can just graze away, take a video, use a GoPro if you want to, put it all back, get your poles back out and carry on trekking. All that without stopping. I put a large dry bag, again, attached to my hauling shafts. That way I can swivel around. I can then get my head torch out, balaclava, change balaclava, even put my down jacket in there, just all the easy stuff. Just means I can keep plodding on. Walking strategy. Some people have different walking strategies. Just learn whatever walking strategy works for you. Do you like to power walk for 2 hours and then have a 15-minute break? I know a lot of polar explorers kind of have that strategy. They then graze their graze bags and then carry on again. Frankly, I like to plod on, and I will often plod on for sort of 6 or 8 hours without a real break. And it's just what I like to do. And I will eat and drink as I'm going along and then just stop for sort of 10, 15 minutes. It suits me to do that and just stay absolutely clipped into my harness and just carry on. So that's a little bit about my training and strategy, basically using the time to think about different strategies I'm going to develop and bits and pieces to work for me. At the end of my little ramble, I'll be just quick fire list of things that I found useful, that some of which may be useful or interesting to people that are watching here today. In terms of food, I absolutely love my food, and planning my food for the races is actually great fun. I know some people just go and grab a bit of nosh from the supermarket and that'll do. Whatever, fuel is food, food is fuel, and that kind of thing. But for me, I try and make it as interesting as I can. I know science, I understand, dictates that during these races, we can only absorb so many calories a day. And that varies depending on your body mass, whether you're male or female and so on, but it's certainly less than 6,000 calories a day, I understand. Nonetheless, I make up daily ration packs of 6,000 calories, even though I know some of it will pass straight through me and some of it I won't eat. The main reason really is that I have options. It means that because your tastes change as you're racing, it means my strategy is absolutely, so 6,000 calories. My typical ration pack includes 2 medium energy meals of about 700 calories each, a portion of cashews and banana chips, 2 bags of jellies, wine gums alike, 2 bags of chocolate, sort of chocolate buttons or whatever, 6 baby bells, half a packet of chocolate biscuits, 4 sachets of instant porridge. They're a great go-to for me. And I take 3 litres of tea in flasks. I use the tea to make my meals. Doesn't sound as gross as it really it sounds grosser than it really is. I use those for my instant porridge, and I carry coffee bags as well. I love Taylor's hot lava java. That's my treat, and I'll make a nice freshly brewed coffee as and when I fancy it. When I first entered the 6633, I had a way of eating which I thought was a great idea. I had a bum bag with 3 flip top bottles in it. One had jellies in, one had a kind of a trail mix, and one had chocolate. Sadly, they all froze, and I ended up with an absolutely knackered tongue by the end of several days. So my second evolution of the food was a press seal plastic bag, all the food in different bags dotted around my body, which worked really well until the Yukon Arctic Ultra just over a year ago, when at -40, -45, it took me so long to get my mitts off my outer gloves to open these plastic bags and consume the food. By the time I'd re-mitted up, my hands had gone numb, and it was getting pretty scary. And I then lost the will to eat. I then lost the will to live. And I'm afraid that was the beginning of the end for me. And I learned a lot from that race. And hopefully I might have a chance to talk in the Q&A about my failure on that race and what I learned from it. So my now latest evolution is extra lightweight dry bags, all color coded, and they're dotted around my body. You can open them with mitts. You can pour the food into your mouth. They reseal, and that works really well. So that's how I keep my food. Very quickly on clothing, my view is absolutely take advice. You'll often need less clothing than you think. Make sure you have different combinations. Make sure some of those will have lots of pockets. I find pockets really useful, so they keep the food from freezing. Some have hoods, some not have hoods. I also make sure the race pants I wear have a bum pocket for wet wipes, which can be very, very useful. Frozen wet wipes are not good. Remember, we're all different. I never get cold feet. I wear a very thin liner sock with a mid sort of acrylic-y, cottony sock. Never get cold feet, but I do get very cold hands. And for my next outing, I'm going to have to upgrade my glove system. Silly things like I saw a photograph when I first had my talk with Martin and other participants about an athlete who had frostbite on his inner thigh because he'd worn too much layering around his upper leg area. And again, by practicing whatever, I found for me, briefs work best. My running pants, -20 or colder, I wear long johns beneath them, and if it weather takes a sudden dip, I then put my overtrousers on. Works perfectly, and I don't get overly hot. Lastly, on clothing, learn to adjust. You'll get used to, if you start to go down a dip, it'll get colder. If you see a hill coming up, start to strip off before you go uphill. You will get warm. Better to always be slightly cold than actually getting up a sweat. When you get up a sweat, you can get into trouble at that point. Martin, I'm sure, will talk about clothing in much greater detail than I did. A sleep system is something that even after 3 races, I am still not happy with. I hate bivvy sleeping and have never ever enjoyed it, whether in good weather, but particularly in very cold temperatures. I feel like I'm in a coffin and feel incredibly claustrophobic. So there are advantages to bivvy sleeping, to speed, but I will be absolutely using a tent when I next go back out to do the Yukon Arctic Ultra 430. The difference in setup time, I think, for me is marginal. The lack of coffin experience is preferable in the tent, and it just does allow you to sort your crap out a little bit in that tent situation. So tent, I think, will be my go-to next time. Lastly, then, just to finish up, a few quick fire tips. Have a system for everything. Try and use clever things like I use different color bags in my puck. Within those bags, I have a clothing bag, for example, and in that bag, I have further color-coded bags, red, amber, and green bags. Traffic lights for me, anything in a red bag is to do with my head, balaclava, hat, and so on. Anything amber or yellow is to do with my middle, so my gloves and my extremities. Anything green is for my feet. You really want to be accessing gear very, very easily and quickly when you need it. Enjoy the pain, you'll have some. Always ease yourself into these races. The first night will probably be a big shock to the system. Enjoy the pain. Focus only on the next checkpoint. Have a race strategy, but be prepared to change it. Take some luxuries. Become an expert with walking poles, often overlooked, I think. And lastly, enjoy the pain and the glory that will follow. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. So when are you planning to do the next Yukon Arctic Ultra then? Which one are you signed up for?
I was due to go out in about a month's time, of course cancelled because of something going on at the moment. And depending on when the next Yukon Quest race is run and which direction it goes, and that will dictate when the next long distance long distance Yukon Arctic Ultra is. So that will dictate when I go. So it'll either be 2022 or 2023. So yeah, it'll be one of those years. So I may even be looking to do a 66:33 at some point on the new course if I can squeeze it in.
Brilliant. So what do you do kind of event-wise in between the big Arctic ultras? What are you doing to keep yourself up to?
And this is where again I'm absolutely not a proper athlete. I ebb and flow in terms of my fitness, and I struggle to maintain a strong fitness level. So I will do relatively nothing for a while, just the odd sort of recreational run, and I'll probably try and get 2 serious races in the year. I'll then put those races in, and then for 4 months prior to that race, I'll train hard. So I've now just recently signed up for the Spine race in the summer, and I've kicked my training off for that now. So for those that don't know, the Spine is 268 miles, the length of the Pennine Way, with quite a few 1,000 meters of altitude gain. But it is midsummer, so it's more comfortable than the proper Spine. I'll do that, and then I will try and do a couple of winter ultras, depending on how the land lies, just to sort of keep a reasonable level of fitness up. But I really only do sort of a couple of races, maybe 3 races a year, just because I can't really justify the time away too much.
Yeah, of course. Okay, fantastic.
And so I've been asked on here today to talk about training for the 6633. My background is 23 years in the military, where I did pretty much every sport in that imaginable, moving into triathlon, Ironman, and endurance sport, ultras. And I started coaching within the military. So I left the military about 6 or 7 years ago, and now I'm a full-time coach for triathlon and endurance sport, ultra running. So that's what I do at the moment. As Stuart said, I did the 6633 a couple of years ago. I sat down with Martin, and he asked me why I wanted to do the 6633, and I said I wanted to do something that scares the crap out of me. And this race scares the crap out of you. It's obviously the environment. As Paul said, the DNF rate is so high. You know, there's a really, really good chance you're not going to finish this race. I know the races like it, but that's the challenge, isn't it? That's why we do these things. If it was easy, you know, you'd go and play football. But, you know, these things are here to challenge us. So, yeah, I went back last year and I was crew. So I've seen the race from both sides. I've seen it from the athlete side, and I've seen it from the crew side. Both very, very different, both amazing in different ways. But going back last year was something different to see it from the crew side. So that was great. Paul has mentioned a lot of the things that I'm actually going to talk about, which is great. I've not spoken to Paul about training at all, but 99% of the things I'm going to talk about is what he's employed. So I'm really pleased that the things I'm going to talk about has worked for Paul. However, there's many ways to skin a cat. What I suggest may work for you, it may not. What Paul has suggested may or may not work. But if you take little things from what I say or from what Paul says, you're probably going to be heading in the right direction. Probably. 6633, Iditarod, Yukon Arctic Ultra, any of those races, these are big, big races, and they take a big commitment. You can't wing these races. You can't just rock up and do them. So they take a lot of commitment. You know, it's a big deal. And with what's going on in the world at the moment, we don't know whether we can do these races. So it's a luxury, it's a privilege to do these races. So if you get an opportunity one day, please go out and have a look at one of these races, because it'll change your life. I'm not joking. It's a life-changing experience. So getting back to training, as Martin said, as Paul said, the training generally for any big endurance event starts off quite general, and as you get closer to the event, it gets more specific. So the general work for this could start 6 months before the event, or 9 months, or 12 months. And that could be anything. That could be running, it could be walking, it could be general fitness training. But as you move closer to the event, that's when it gets more specific. So again, as Paul said, this is when you're looking at things like time on feet, pulling a tire or pulling your pulk, training through the night. These are when you're doing your big days. This is the specific work. Now, before we get into some of the detail, I spoke to some of the former athletes who did the race when I did the race, and I just mentioned how this race is a big, big commitment. It was huge. So I spoke to Paul Watkins. Now, Paul Watkins, he won the race the year that I did it, but 2 years previously, he DNF'd the race, and he DNF'd quite early. So he had 2 years away, got his head right, did different training, and came back. But his peak training hours was 15 to 20 hours a week. That's what he was doing in the final 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. Hayley White, who did the race the year I did it, and she finished the 380 race, she was doing 20 hours a week. And for myself, I was doing 20 to 22 hours a week. So it's a huge commitment. So whether you're talking financial commitment and time away from family, time training, it's a big deal. So if you're going to do these events, please look into these events, do all your research. Again, it's life-changing, but it takes a lot of work. So if we go back to the kind of general training, the main bulk of that general training will probably be running, hiking, pulling a sled or pulling your tire, and some strength and conditioning work. That's all the general stuff. That's what you should be doing months and months and months away from your event. As you get closer, that's when you're moving more towards your kind of specific training. So this is where it's more about time on feet. This is about where you're going to become comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, you're out in the night, you're out in the cold, you're out in the wet. We can't quite replicate that cold weather, but we can replicate being uncomfortable. You know, if you're doing the 6633 and you're out there for 9 days, you're going to get pretty uncomfortable. So you have to learn, you know, it's a physical thing, it's a mental thing. You have to be used to these bigger days and bigger sessions. So for me, some of these big days could be, you know, 6 or 8 hours hiking. It could be as simple as that. It could be just walking around the local town, or it could be going up to the beacons or somewhere close to you. But as you get closer and closer to the event, you need to start doing these kind of back-to-back big days. So you might do like 6 hours on a Saturday, and maybe 6 hours or 8 hours on a Sunday. So that Sunday session, you're going in quite tired, quite fatigued. That's the kind of thing you're trying to replicate for this event. You know, you're going to be very tired. You're going to be doing 50 miles a day, as Paul said, on your feet. So you need to get used to being fatigued and going out there and doing it again. Strength and conditioning at this point of the final kind of 8 weeks, strength and conditioning is quite important. Some people pay lip service to it. I think it's quite important. You know, if you're pulling your sled up Wright's Path, which can take you 5 or 6 hours, you need to be quite strong. You know, you're pulling 20 kilos, 30 kilos behind you. You need to have that strength endurance. You've got your pulk, pulling your shoulders, pulling your hips. So it's quite important that we have some strength about us. Also, the strength helps with injury prevention as well. So that's a good one to keep an eye on. Good session that I quite enjoyed was a big hike into a bivvy. So I'd go out for about 6 hours, come home about midnight, 1 in the morning, and straight into a bivvy in the garden. So for Paul, it could be a tent, and for me, it was a bivvy. So I practiced getting in my sleeping bag, getting in my bivvy, 1 o'clock in the morning, it was cold, I was tired, and getting those systems in place, because when it's minus 20, minus 30, you need to get in that sleeping bag as quickly as possible. If you're messing around, you're going to get really cold really quickly. So practicing your hike into a bivvy is quite important. Pulling your sled or pulling a tire. Again, some people don't really advocate this, but I think it's imperative to pull something in training. You know, getting used to the shoulder straps, the harness, pulling on your hips. That's really, really important. And one of the final things I did this twice in the training for me, which was a 24-hour day where I did a 2-hour hike back to my house. So a 2-hour route to my house. I had an hour in the house, and then I went out again for 2 hours, and I did that for 24 hours. So that was a big day. That was really hard. It was really boring as well. Really, really boring. It was the same loop every time. Yeah, same loop. But when you're out on the ice, as beautiful as the ice road is, it looks the same for 110 miles or something. So you have to get used to that mental space where you're doing the same thing over and over again. Just keep on trucking, keep on moving forwards. And if your head's not there, then it's going to be very, very difficult. So boring and mundane, get used to that, because a lot of it's beautiful, but it can be quite monotonous as well. For the training, that's probably as far as I'm going to go tonight, but I'll just emphasize a few points, and pretty much what Paul said as well. You've got to practice all of these things. You've got to practice packing your pulk. You need to know where your base layers are. You need to know where your gloves are. You need to know where your food is. If you're messing around, digging around in your pulk, trying to find things, you're just standing still. And well, there's two things really. You're going to get cold, but also if you're not moving forwards, you ain't, well, as another athlete told me, if you ain't moving, you ain't finishing. And that's so true. So if you know where everything is, it makes it so much easier. So much easier. Systems. I would also research the route. Yeah, I knew exactly how far it was from checkpoint to checkpoint. I knew whether it was going to be a trailer at the checkpoint, whether it was going to be a school, so you know what's coming up. Right, it's 10 miles and I'm in. So that's about 3 hours, right? Okay, 3 hours, I'm in the warm. If you don't know where you are, if you don't know what's going on, it's really, really difficult. Martin will tell you about systems, layering up, so important. And the final thing I would probably mention is attention to detail. If you have any issues, sort them out. If you have any blisters or you have any rubbing, I stopped. Small blister come in, fixed it, no problem. Going up Wright's Pass, I was sweating. I stopped straight away, stripped off, full strip off, full reclothe, and I was away. Any little issue, don't think I'll sort it out in a few miles, or I don't want to eat now. Do it now. It's those little things, those little pieces of attention to detail that could be the difference between you finishing and not finishing. One final thing I was talking about, if you ain't moving, you ain't finishing. Whenever I speak about 6633, someone always asks about sleep. So I'll just finish with sleep. I did the 380 race, 9 days, got in just under the cutoff. I slept for 19 hours in 9 days. So that's about 2 hours and 10 minutes a day. So if you're messing around with your gloves, with your food, you ain't gonna finish. You're not getting much sleep. You've got to keep moving forwards. So, and the other question with that also is, do you practice not sleeping in training? No. If you're having a little baby and the baby's going to keep you up all night, you don't practice not sleeping before the baby comes. So you just get on with it. You will sleep. I know Paul didn't like sleeping in bivvies. I was in a bivvy and I was out like a light every time. You will sleep. Don't worry about that. But you can't have too much sleep because you just won't finish. And I'll finish on this, but the 6623 is a great race. I'd love to do the Yukon Arctic Ultra one day. As I said at the start, if you get a chance to do these things are amazing and they will change your life. So if you get a chance, go for it.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
So you've been crew and you've been a racer. What do you prefer?
I'm not sure racer is the word I would use. Competitor, maybe.
Competitor.
What did I prefer? They were both amazing, absolutely amazing. I know I've said it a few times, but it is life-changing. Seeing it from the other side, seeing it from the crew side was amazing. Because I'd been there. I knew how much they were suffering. I had a little bit more empathy, perhaps, than one or two of the other crew members. Yeah, it's just incredible. Some of the sights you see. Another top tip, Veronica's going to be coming on next. If she asks you if you'd like to stop for a photo, because she will capture something amazing. She captured myself and a couple of other guys under the Northern Lights, and I didn't want to stop. I was tired. But she asked us to stop, and we stopped, and that picture is now on my office wall over there. Stunning. So if you get the chance to go, you see the Northern Lights and they're bouncing around and it's stunning. But would I go back and race again? Not a chance. Not a chance. No. It's I'm sorry, but I left a little bit of my soul out on that ice road, and as amazing as it was, I wouldn't go back and race it. But I'd go back and crew it whenever I was asked, because it's stunning.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Stuart. So I am going to share my screen and show a few photos of that epic scenery Mark was just talking about. A little bit of background on myself. My name is Veronica Murray. I've been the race photographer since 2017. I kind of reached out to Martin when I was looking to start doing photography as a career. I wanted to have an experience photographing a sports event, and there aren't that many of those in Inuvik. And Arctic Ultra happened to be just happening literally on my doorstep. So it was kind of an obvious choice. And they allowed me to come along, and they haven't been able to get rid of me since. I hope to be around, even though I relocated to Whitehorse from Inuvik last month. I hope to keep doing the race because it's a really awesome experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Arctic environment. Let me just get my ducks in order here. My goodness, it's been a very long time since I used a PowerPoint slideshow. Nope. Start slideshow.
Want some help, Veronica?
Yeah, that would be lovely, actually. How do I start a slideshow?
From the beginning? From the beginning?
Yeah.
On the top left, go up left.
Left.
Left. Left.
Left.
Left, the other way. Left, isn't it? That's it. Keep going left. Press there.
Right there. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Martin. What do I do without you? Okay. That's why you're the race director.
Absolutely. Technical expert.
Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit about the environment. So for those of you who have done the race or crewed on the race, I don't think any of what I'm going to say is going to be great news. I am going to relate mostly to the 6633, although I hope that like the general points can be applied to any cold weather race here. So it may come as a surprise, but it is cold in the Arctic. These are average temperatures for February for the towns along the route of the race. Then again, this is high average and low average for the month of February. However, you can expect pretty much anything from -10 to -40 along the route. And of course, on top of that, you have wind chill, which can make things feel significantly more miserable. There are people out there, believe it or not, who do not believe in wind chill. And to me, they fall on the same spectrum as flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So this is a shot from the Hurricane Alley. So this is going up right past on the Yukon side. I believe this is 2018. Even though this photo looks quite serene, this was actually a storm from hell, and you can see an athlete going here. The road is completely blown over, so you can't really see the road. You can see a little bit of snow drifts here in the bottom of the photo. From what I've heard from the athletes, big wheels are generally a little better than small wheels on your pulks for if you come across conditions like these. But this was pretty nasty. And now I am going to tie back into something that Mark said about sorting out your gear when you have to and not leaving it for later. To sort it out in a few miles. These are two images taken about an hour and a half apart, featuring the same individuals. So this is going up right past on the Yukon side. Right past is typically a place where weather changes, and you will likely see total opposites on each side of the pass. So this is going up right past on the Yukon side. It's a really nice sunny day. There is a little bit of clouds, but it's pretty high up in the mountains, so it's pretty normal. And these are the same guys coming out down the pass on the other side. Literally, you get over the pass and you hit a massive, massive windstorm. So the thing to remember is that your entire kit will be in these conditions for days, aside from small breaks to warm up at a check stop. So it's worth, remembering about things like, is your stuff too brittle? Is it going to break at -35? That's a problem with a lot of plastic elements of the kit. Are you dressed well to take bathroom breaks comfortably in these conditions? Is your kit secured? I've seen people lose everything from mitts to sleeping bags in windstorms like these. So those are all, things that you should keep in mind, preparing for a race like this. That your kit, basically, you will have to be able to work with it in whatever the weather throws at you out there. And it's also worth keeping in mind, even though the race organizers are doing their best to keep everyone safe and everybody is tracked and everybody is always accounted for, you are in a place where it may happen that you may not be able to be rescued right away. So I've personally been in a situation where I was weathered in on the Dempster Highway in a broken vehicle, and I ended up spending the night in a highway maintenance camp. Luckily, they were able to give me a place to stay. But just keep in mind that you may have to be self-sufficient even when you need help. It's just something to keep in mind. I think it's a good, let's say, attitude adjustment when you realize that there may be times when nobody can come get you. I was involved when I lived in Nuvik with emergency services there. And yes, there are weather and conditions when search and rescue does not search for people. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So generally, in the Arctic, you are unlikely to get wet unless you sweat. There is no really open water that you could step into. It's as we joke, it's a dry cold. However, all this should come with a disclaimer that we've been seeing more and more very unusual weather events in the north. The climate change is serving us some really unusual temperatures. For example, this year it rained on the Dempster Highway in December. So I am not saying that you should pack a raincoat doing an Arctic race, but the further north you go, the more those extreme weather events are common. The Arctic generally warms up about 3 times the global average. And we see up here, we see those changes much faster than the rest of the world. Here, I just wanted to show you a couple of photos of what that looks like when there is no snow and ice on the ground. This is shore erosion about 100 kilometers northwest of Tuktoyaktuk. And for scale, because it's kind of hard to get an idea of how big these blocks are without trees, there is a person in a helicopter in the top right here. So the Arctic is changing super fast, and it's something worth keeping in mind. And also maybe if you enjoy those sort of races, like we have to keep this in mind, that this is an environment that's disappearing. This is just outside of Tuktoyaktuk. Those bands you see here, this is ice. The ground around Tuktoyaktuk is about 90% ice, so it's getting absolutely destroyed by climate warming. And this is what it literally means for the residents of Tuktoyaktuk. This is a house on the point. This is about 300 meters from the finish line. That lady doesn't live there anymore. One question that I get very often every year from the athletes is about wild animals and threat from wild animals on the course. It is extremely unlikely. I will not tell you that it will never happen, but the bears are hibernating and every other animal wants nothing to do with you when you're out on the road. So there have been stories of people being followed by wolves and whatnot. And I won't say they are not true, but they are extremely unlikely. The caribou here in the photo was killed by hunters and then dragged around by animals. But there is no real threat from wildlife on the course. However, there is a real threat from traffic. So one thing worth keeping in mind is that when you're racing on the Dempster Highway or on ice roads, those are roads that are built for one purpose, basically, and that's bringing goods into the northern communities. And the truckers that drive on those roads are not accustomed to seeing pedestrians. In the summertime, there is, I would say, a bit more tolerance for foot traffic on the road because people are used to seeing cyclists, bikers, and whatnot. In the wintertime, we as locals drive the roads and we do not expect to see people in the shoulder. And also a very common thing to do in the north is driving in the middle of the road because there is no lanes. The shoulders are soft, so we generally stay away from them. And people will drive in the middle of the road unless they are approaching a curve or a hill or see something, oncoming. So it's worth keeping in mind if you're walking in the middle of the road that you really have to watch yourself and you have to watch your back because people will drive in the middle of the road. And maybe with, if somebody has driven this road 100 times, people drive fast and people drive without paying much attention because by drive, they know the road by heart and they just kind of go on autopilot driving the road. I am kind of breezing through this here. Okay, so I decided to cast the environment net a little wider and also talk a little bit about being in the communities and meeting the locals and knowing a little bit about the area where the race takes place. So depending where you're from, in Canada, it is, I would say, pretty standard now that you should know on whose territory in terms of First Nations or Inuit you are. So the ARC 6633 takes place on Gwich'in and Nunavut territory. And generally you are setting up yourself for much better interactions with people in the communities if you know a little bit about the area. Now, what's worth keeping in mind is that you are coming to a place with a very heavy historical baggage of colonization. You are coming to a place where white people generally for decades have come to take and to change things their way, and not necessarily in a respectful or even humanitarian way. And you have to keep that in mind when you interact with people, when you see, there's a lot of social issues. You may see drunk people, you may see poverty. It is very easy to judge those things, but it is important to understand the background and the kind of historical circumstance. What else? People in the communities are generally a bit more traditional. Treat people like you would treat your grandparents. Be polite, say hello, good morning, thank you. It is this race and any other race worth finding out what are the local, let's say, customs. What are, people will offer you stuff for sale. Is it polite, for example, to bargain for prices? I can tell you right away that in the north it is not. It is very disrespectful. What else? Yeah, you will come across local artists, and if you don't come across them, I highly recommend that you seek them out. In Tuktoyaktuk, you ask anyone who makes whatever item you may be looking for, people will point you in the right direction. It's usually very casual. You can invite it to someone's house and they will show you the merchandise they have. A big part of the economy in the north is still fishing and hunting. So this is a site you may see on an ice road. So you will come across people traveling in trucks and snowmobiles and whatnot. People are generally super friendly, and if they stop to talk to you, it's because they are curious or they think you're a little crazy. But they are usually super friendly, and they will also likely offer you food and drink and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just a few shots from events in the communities. We were very lucky in Aklavik a few years ago. The community put on a drum dance for us during the race. So that was super awesome to see. Here is a Tuktoyaktuk carver, Les Ruddy, working in a muskox horn. All these traditional crafts are handmade. That's why they are usually quite expensive, but they are definitely worth buying. And yes, you can bring them across borders as long as they are crafts and not the actual bones. So that is not an issue unless your country has specific restrictions on that. I really hope I didn't focus too much on the scary and dangerous aspects of the race. It is a really awesome experience. Here's actually Mark. I'm not sure if Mark had a lot of appreciation for the landscape that was behind him, but it is an extremely spectacular race. And something that's, yeah, it will blow your mind. The northern lights actually do get as bright as they are in this photo. So you can basically walk without a headlamp. So it's pretty special. This is TB on Inuvik Highway. So yeah, as a crew member, I can tell you do it, because I've seen, you know, people have just an amazing experience, and it is something very unique, and it is unfortunately an environment that may not exist anymore in 100 years. So I think it's very, very important to take advantage of it. Thank you.
And good evening, guys. Lovely to be part of this evening. So just a little bit about me, and then I'm going to breeze through what I was going to talk about, and then I'm sure we'll talk a bit more medically down the line, maybe November, December time, a bit closer to the event. So I'm a paramedic by trade, working anaesthetics in paediatric and adult cardiac anaesthetics. And at the moment, I'm stuck in ICU working on COVID-19 patients, which is not much fun. Anyway, past that, our job medically with you guys is to look after you and support you from this point onwards, whenever you come out to the event, until you get back on dry land, back to your own home countries. The primary, like I say, is to support you. Now, but the benefit of being on the 6633 as an athlete back in 2015, I was doing the junior race, as Martin likes to point out, the 350 miler. So I haven't actually completed the 383. So I'm seen as a bit of a failure, really, in Martin's eyes. Never mind. You might want to ask Martin how many miles he's done in it. Anyway, that said, so you're approximately 12 months out from the event, and this is where the journey begins. It's a very, very exciting journey. And it's important to now really get yourself ready, both your body and mind, really conditioning yourself for what you're about to put yourself through. As the other guys have said, it's a beautiful place to go to. And it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing to do. I mean, I've been lucky to go back there to do support as well as race. But it is something you need to get your head around, and the enormity of the event that you're taking on. So when I say about body and mind conditioning, I refer an awful lot to your feet, for example, and your back. So Mark and Paul have talked about training, pulling sleds, pulling tires, etc., etc. Time on your feet. It's really, really important you get to know your body well before you come out and do the event. I mean, I personally was very badly prepared, so I feel like a bit of a hypocrite talking to you about this. But whenever I went out, I mean, I'd never done anything more than 50 miles as an ultra before. And it was a charity challenge. I literally am not a big fan of beach holidays. I wanted to see the Northern Lights, and I thought, oh, that looks like a pretty Gucci race. I'm going to have a crack at that. And because it was rated as a very, very tough event, I thought that's what I want to do. So I didn't really condition my body properly for what I was taking on, and it was almost sheer bloody mindedness that got me to the finish line there. Gavin Hennigan pulling me along, and also trying to chase down Paul Fosh. It was a few hours ahead of me, and much better organised than I was. So moving on really to getting your admin right, and practicing back in the UK before you go out there. It not only makes you a better athlete or a better competitor, but it'll keep you from actually having to see myself or Scott, who's also online, or Chris, the other medic. Because ideally you want to avoid us like the plague. You want to keep well clear of us and just get yourself to the finish line and not have to deal with us at all. But with 383 miles to do, there is a good chance that you will be visiting us at some stage along the Dempster towards Tuck. So going back to the likes of admin, testing your kit's really, really key. And the reason I say that is things like your trainers, all right, your feet will swell quite significantly when you're out there. So making sure you've got the right trainers and you're prepared for your feet swelling and potentially leading on to issues with your feet. Issues like chafe as well. May sound like, it's like a very small issue, but it has been a game changer for some athletes who've been out there and in fact has stopped the race because it's been quite severe. So making sure that the equipment that you get, like your mid layers and that kind of thing, don't chafe you. And you are putting in some pretty serious mileage with this equipment. Okay, so you are putting in some good walking miles. And I go back to what Paul said about Martin's training schedule. I followed that to a T before I come out. And I can't speak highly enough for that training plan. So once you're testing your kit, using that training plan, you'll get to know your feet and you'll get to know what kit chafes you. Things like your gloves, making sure your gloves can open your zips on your jacket. For example, if you're in a bit of an emergency, you need to change your layers, but making sure that you keep your hands covered, stop you getting frostnip or frostbite. So making sure that your gloves, you've practiced with your gloves, with your zip and with your equipment, so you can get access to your warm kit quickly if you need to, or your bivy bag quickly if you need to. All right, so that's something I actually practiced in my bedroom before I went out there, and in the conservatory, just setting this equipment up, setting up the sleeping system, getting into it, getting back out of it, and then testing your zips. Okay, it's better to test them in your own house or in your own back garden than it is when you're out in the Dempster in -35. Mid layers, Martin, I'm sure will go into mid layers with you, but it's important to get really good mid layers. It stops you sweating, and the last thing you want to be doing is sweating when you're out on the Dempster as well. All right. So again, Mark's already touched on it briefly, and so has Paul, about your equipment and getting the right equipment. So just think about mid layers and just get the right ones and train with them and make sure you're happy with them. And then face coverings as well. All right, so making sure you got your face covered. Again, with the wind condition that you've seen in Veronica's photographs, the wind does really kick up. It is cold out there, so there is that chance of getting cold injuries on your face, hands, and other areas that are exposed. And even those areas that are covered, and then they've suffered with a bit of sweat. Again, with conditioning, we're looking at things like musculoskeletal injuries. So you need to keep your eye out for if you're overtraining. Again, this is not my field, but a field of expertise is more in Mark's field of expertise. I'm sure you guys, if you're signing up for this event, or the Yukon Arctic Ultra or the Iditarod, that you're going to be, very in tune with your body and what your training capacity is. But just be aware of things like stress fractures and back injuries if you are not used to pulling weight. And if you're training on trail, for example, or training on roads, there's a big difference between going on the trail and going on a pavement for 50, 60 mile back-to-back training sessions. So just be very aware of that. Even at this early stage, you're on a 12-month journey, and the last thing you want to be doing is causing yourself any real damage now. That's not going to pay off once you get to next year and we can actually get back out racing again. Common medical injuries that myself and Scott and Chris would see, predominantly feet. So sweating, if you've got the wrong socks on, you'll be more than aware of the areas that you're going to get hot spots from your training. So it's important that you're condition your feet, get your feet ready for the adventure of a lifetime. But at the same time, you know how to prevent those injuries. So whether it's using tape or other magical ways of protecting your feet, it's a good idea to test it back here. Okay, but I'm more than happy to go in and do some foot care seminars with you beforehand as well. Chest infections and common colds, it's quite common for that to happen once you get yourself out to Whitehorse, traveling on aircraft, and being around other athletes, and also getting to cold conditions when you're used to being from a warm country or quite a humid country. It can be a bit of a shock to the system. Dehydration is a big one when you're out there as well. You wouldn't think you would get that in the cold, but you absolutely do. It's quite dry out there, so make sure you've got a good regimen in place for nutrition and hydration. You might get a bit of a sore throat as well when you're out there. Again, it's a good idea to make sure you've got good face covering, and it's something we can go into closer to the time. Dental emergencies, again, it's a good idea to make sure you get your teeth sorted out before you go out. I had a tooth removed yesterday, which was a joy, but it's a good idea to make sure you get yourself to your dentist before you go out there, all right? Otherwise, you get to meet myself and Chris, who did some dental work on sea a couple of years ago, which was hilarious, but I don't think she found it as funny as we did. With the temperatures that we'd expect to see out there, there is that chance of getting frostnip and frostbite. Now, that has become a more commonplace in the last couple of years. But again, think back to covering your face and covering all these areas that might be in line with the winds. Another little idea you could have is have a mirror to make sure you've actually got these areas covered on your face if you're not buddied up with somebody else. But these can range in severity, and unfortunately, these are an event ender for you. We've got a real strict policy about this, especially with fingers and your nose, because if your hands get damaged, then you can't use your zips and you can't actually use your stove properly and things like that. So it's more of a health and safety thing than anything. Again, chafe can be a big one, so just make sure you're trying to prevent that. Prevention's better than cure. All right. You got shins, ankles, hips, and back. My ankles were terrible whenever I was out there. Once I got to Inuvik, so you will be potentially getting swelling around your ankles and your knees. All right, but again, you'll be more in tune with your bodies the more you're conditioning them throughout the next 12 months. Nerve injury is something again I suffered with just because I had my harness too tight around my waist, and I wasn't aware of what exactly I'd done, but I'd done a perfect nerve block on my nerve of thigh. which took about 6 months to heal. So you had pins and needles in your leg. So just make sure you're using your harness a little bit before you come out, and don't do it too tight. And then you get to know the limitations on that, and making sure you don't cause any damage to your nerves. And then finally, you can get stomach issues as well. And this can be more related to not trying your nutrition before you come out, or change your nutrition. So just be aware of the likes of coming through customs with certain bags which you're not supposed to be bringing into Canada. So just double check and really have a look at the bottom of the bags that you want to use, potentially getting them ordered out to Whitehorse itself, or seeing what brands are available in Whitehorse and making sure you custom yourself to them back in your home country before you arrive out there. Okay, just means you want to have a shock, all right, whenever you come out there and you can't get the food that you're used to using, and then you start having stomach complaints as well. It goes without saying, even before the issue with COVID-19, it's always been good practice to keep your hands clean, especially when you're working in close environments with other athletes. I mean, I've worked in Fiji and the Fijian jungle ultra a few years ago, and the Amazon jungle as well. And hand hygiene is key, always is key, especially whenever athletes, of course, are out running and then using the bathroom on the side of the road, or using in the jungle. There's not toilets everywhere, so it's important to make sure you're getting good hand hygiene, especially then when you come into checkpoints. Make sure you're nice and clean when you come in there, or as clean as you can be, and just for the safety of the crew as well. All right. Before you come out, really important to get to grips with underlying medical conditions that you might have. I'm a massive advocate for anybody coming out and taking part in one of these events. I think they're fantastic, and I think it's really key that anybody can come out and do them, as long as they prepare themselves for the challenge ahead. But it is also obviously over to you guys to make sure that you're familiar with your own medical history. I always find, like, the diabetics are real. You know your condition, you're experts in your condition. But it's important to make sure you see your specialist before you come out, and by all means contact myself, Chris, or Scott, primarily Scott, for the next 12 months to get advice from us. All right. But we can then refer you back to your specialist in hand. All right. Get used to the medications and underlying medications that you normally would take, and make sure they can handle being in the cold. For example, if you're a diabetic and you're asthmatic, it's important to know whether your conditions can actually work. Sorry, your medications can work while you're out there. Okay. We hold on to some medications as well for you guys, but it's important that you've got your own medical kits that are fully stocked, and you get on top of any conditions that you have before you come out. All right. This is, again, you can get in touch with me and I can talk you through any of this stuff. And then going back to dentists, I'm not a fan of dentists myself, but it's really important that you do see your dentist. Everybody should see their dentist before they come out, and that includes crew. Again, it's not easy to get your hands on the dentist when you're out there, and you can be having a fantastic event, beautiful race, northern lights everywhere, and you crack a tooth, and then it does make things quite miserable for you. So get on top of that. If you have had any previous cold injuries as well, pay attention to those. There's a very good chance they're going to get worse when you go out there. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but also to make sure previous athletes who have come out have made sure they've got fantastic gloves next time they come out. All right, because obviously you want to go back to your normal lives, back to your jobs, whether you're an accountant, a surgeon, a pianist, whatever, photographer. You want to make sure your hands are in good working order, or a model. You want to make sure your nose is still intact. All right, so make sure you do think about those things, and also think about the surgeries you may have had in the past as well, and just let us know about those, but consider them before you come out. All right, we're getting through it. Mental preparation and sleep management. Part of the conditioning is getting yourself mentally ready for coming out. Okay, again, trip of a lifetime, an amazing place to come out to, fantastic culture to see, but just get used to the fact that you're going to be in the dark on your own at night, pulling a sled on some occasions. You're going to be cold and you're going to be tired. All right. Now, you'll have seen lots of books around from some amazing athletes who've been out before, and you'll maybe have seen some threads as well about people who hallucinations, etc., etc. I hallucinated when I was out there. I managed myself very badly just before I got to tuck, and it's my own fault. And I let myself down really. But hallucinating isn't something that's to boast about. Really, you should be on top of your admin and on top of your sleep. And preventing any sort of hallucinations, because it means you're out of control. It means you're putting yourself at risk, and you're putting the crew at risk as well. So I personally am considering, if I was to do the YAU in future, or to do the 66-33 next year, to maybe do a sleep study and make sure I'm aware of when my deep sleep is, and getting my sleep system right so that I'm comfortable when I get straight into bed. But similar to Mark, whenever I was in the bivvy, I was out like a light when I did sleep. All right, and finally, medicals. So you'll get some medicals done. You'll need to have a medical done before you come out next year. But again, that's something we can readdress in November time. And that will be not overly complicated. All right. Well, there may be a few little add-ons to that once myself and the rest of the team have a discussion about what's going to be required for next year's medical. But it's not something to worry about right now. So I am going to leave you and say thanks very much and good luck with your training over the next 12 months. Thank you very much.
So the cold weather kit and clothing, I would think probably 80% of blokes and probably 50% of women enter these races not because they want to do the challenge of actually competing the race. They just want to go out and buy kit. In fact, it may be more like 80% and 80%, but I certainly know from my perspective, I did a lot of these races in the good old days, and I'd actually give it 2 hoops about the race. All I want to do is go out and buy more and more kit. At that end, then I also opened my own shop, and that was a lot easier then because I could get kit a lot cheaper and clothing a lot cheaper as well. But one thing about Arctic racing, the Arctic racing, is that you can't skimp on it. There are products that work and there are products that are not. And I suspect in most cases, the stuff that you'll get from the likes of Aldi won't tend to work as well as stuff from more respected suppliers. I'm just going to try and find out what the heck's happened to my prompt list. There it is. So anyway, so we've got clothing considerations now. We'll go through clothing first of all. Number of considerations that you might want to, need to consider. The first and foremost is comfort. Whatever you're going to be wearing, it needs to be comfortable on you. You're going to be wearing it for a long time, so you want to make sure that it isn't too tight, it isn't chafing, isn't flapping around, and so on and so forth. It's just going to be comfortable on you. A very obvious consideration. Then there's the warmth factor. You're going to be out in the cold, obviously, therefore you need items that are going to be warm. Now that might not be a single item that needs to be warm. It could be a combination of items, and I'm probably sure that most of you are aware of the kind of layering system of wearing base layers, mid-layer layers, and outer layer layers accordingly. And I'll come on to that a little bit more now when we come through to the products. Although you're going to the Arctic, and it is about as extreme as you're likely to get, you haven't got to go for the warmest of everything. In fact, that's quite counterproductive. Go for things like your base layers. They haven't got to be the warmest. You can have some very silk ones. You can have medium weight. You can have full weight. Again, a combination. The more combinations you have, the better you can micromanage your temperature as you're doing the race. Wind protection is very obvious, particularly in the 6633, probably less so in something like the Yukon Arctic Ultra, where there's a fair bit more protection from the wind, but it's not. It still is a factor that you need to be aware of, and typically that is your outer layer. But things like underwear, for instance, particularly for blokes, wind protection in the nether regions is no bad thing at all. Breathability. You're going to sweat a lot, or you shouldn't really sweat a lot, but you're likely to sweat a lot, particularly on the hills. Again, part of your system should be to try and never sweat. Well, that's slightly impractical, but that should be your aim. But where you do sweat, you really want to make sure that the moisture is moving away from the body. So the products you choose should aid that. And again, we'll come on to those as we go through individual items. And then the practicality of the kit you buy, zips, buttons, poppers, etc. Where are they? How are you going to be able to use them? Are you going to be able to undo your zip with bulky mitts on? Do you need to adapt your clothing equipment to make it manageable during the race? These are all things you'll need to do during your testing. So let's go through a few of the items we're going to look at. We'll look at leg wear, base layers, mid layers, outer layers, socks, gloves, and headwear. Now, what I'm about to say, there are thousands of ways of skinning the cat and of doing this correctly. I'm just going to point out some things that I think are very, very useful. Some things I would recommend strongly, and others it's entirely up to you. So we're going to start off with something that is probably my number one item straight away, though, is for leg wear. is power stretch leggings next to the skin. I mentioned the layering system whereby you typically have a base layer, mid layer, and outer layer. The legs, I think you can, by using power stretch next to the skin, you can do away with having a 3-layer system. And basically, they're just a very comfortable pair of trousers. They're very flexible, and what they are, they're a fleece on the inside. Power stretch is a type of fabric, a very well, what's the word? A technical fabric that has fleece on the inside, traps a lot of air there, helps wick moisture away from the body, and offers a lot of warmth. Plus, they're a very practical pair of trousers that you can, or leggings that you can wear practically all year round. When I was doing these races, I'd be wearing power stretch probably from about October through to April, as far as my training is concerned. They're just lovely to wear. Brand suggestion, there's loads around there that do power stretch. Power stretch products are produced by the likes of Rab, Arc'teryx, Haglos, Montaigne, Mammut, Marmot, loads of them. But power stretch is the premium product, and the pro version is just something to be a little bit more resistant against scuffing and so on and so forth. And for a race of this nature, I would suggest a minimum of 2 pairs to get you through a short race. So in the 6633 or the Yukon Arctic Ultra, for instance, it would be taking you from Whitehorse to Braeburn or from the start line to McPherson, a minimum of 2 pairs. But if you're doing the longer distance, I would say 3 pairs to allow you to have a pair in your kit bag, a pair to change to, and so on and so forth. Then your outer leg wear, these need to be windproof and probably add an additional thermal element to them. So again, what these will typically be will be a Pertex outer and something like a Primaloft fill-in. Super comfortable and vital. So what that will, obviously that's what protects you from the wind getting to your body. The wind will go straight through power stretch. So whilst I'm saying how fantastic it is, it's only good for keeping you for thermal purposes and for wicking purposes. It has no element of windproofing at all, so you do need an outer garment to double it up. Brand suggestion for the outer garment, again, I'm going for the Rab Smoked On. Fantastic pair, but again, I'm giving these products. If you to look at the Rab Smoked On and get the rough brief on it, you'd probably find the similar products from the likes of Arc'teryx, the likes of Montaigne do something. Marmot used to, I don't think they do at the moment, but they might well do. And I did see a very sexy pair of Arc'teryx earlier on today. I was looking through the website. Moving on to the upper body base layer. I'm sorry to rattle through this and we try as quick as I can. I could speak for 2 or 3 hours on kitchen clothing, and it probably justifies having 2 or 3 hours talking about it, but let's just give you the basics to go on with. First consideration is whether you go for wool or synthetic. It's simple. I'd consider both. If you don't like wool, don't wear it. But both wool and synthetic both work very, very well and have different attributes, different pros and cons to them accordingly. Next option is whether you consider long sleeve, zip, crew neck, short sleeve, etc. Again, lots of variations. I'd suggest you just go for a variety of all of them. Basically, then you won't end up with a wardrobe back at home after the race of 4 of the same identical item. At least you've got something that will have a more practical use and a more varied use beyond the race that you're doing. And again, I consider from a thermal quality point of view, you haven't got to, as I mentioned earlier, you haven't got to go for the warmest, thickest versions of everything. In fact, I'd say quite the contrary. The base layers, medium weight is a good start, and then have lighter weight ones, maybe a thick weight one. It's entirely up to you. Whatever you can get in the bargain bins of good quality products, I tend to have a look at. And then brand suggestions, there's hundreds, they're all good. I mean, there's, I've mentioned here, the likes of Patagonia, Rab, Odlo make some fantastic base layers. I haven't mentioned them on there, but Falca make awesome base layers. Experts, they're some of the best out there, but all the big brands make extremely good base layers. Upper body mid layer, there's kind of quite a few products that could tick this box, but you're typically looking at fleeces, and you might also be considering thin down products as your mid layers. Again, there's loads and loads and loads of options. Let's just consider those 2 to start off with. The fleece, for instance, is primarily there to keep you warm. What happens is with the fleece is that the fleece product holds air. That air gets heated up by the body, and that's what keeps you warm. It also has then you then also have a layer between your base layer and your fit. Again, that holds air in its place. That gets warm, keeps you warm. It's the whole purpose of these layers is to hold air and to warm that air that causes the buffer to keep you warm. Thermal quality is fantastic. Look at micro fleeces. Arc'teryx make one called Alpha. It's a superb microweight, very lightweight fleece. Its warmth that it provides is way beyond what you'd consider if you were to see it in a shop. You'd think this isn't much to it. It's absolutely superb piece of kit. And then you've got warmer versions, like I mentioned, Power Stretch, which I think is a superb fabric for these type of events. Again, super warm, super comfortable, and again, lots and lots of options around that you could choose from. When buying these kind of products, consider the ease of use. Full zips in most cases are highly recommended. Trying to take a sweater off can be difficult, can just be cumbersome, particularly with gloves on. But just to undo a zip and lift off your back is a heck of a lot easier. It doesn't mean you haven't got to have everything with full zips, but I would certainly consider that being one of the considerations. Down products for mid-layer use. It's just like a micro down jacket or a gilet. These are all very versatile garments. They've got the use of layering up in the Arctic, but they've also got the use of looking smart when you go down the pub back in the UK. Oh, when the pub's open. But when they do open, you can look smart in the pub. Lots and lots of options there. The brand suggestions, hundreds, everybody's got them. But look at the quality of the down. If you're looking at down products, you're typically looking at a minimum of 750 fill. 800 is probably the kind of the starting point. That's your kind of your BMW of downfill. And once you start going over 800, you're starting to get into the top of the range BMWs, Audis, and then you're getting up into the Lamborghinis when you get up to 900 and 1,000 fills. And the down products, I'm talking about the down products there, Rab, Arc'teryx, Marmot, there's lots of options. Just have a good look around and see what suits you. There's so much choice there, you can actually start considering color at this point in time. Outer layers, two principal types. You've got wind protection. Now this is a product that you're likely to be wearing practically throughout the whole race. Oh, do you want to smile, Johnny? Are you taking a photograph? The outer fabric, Gore, Windstopper, Pertex. These are all products that will be practically 100% windproof. You're putting me off here, Johnny. What are you doing? What are you doing? Outer fabric there. Sorry, I'm ignoring him and look like this. You're likely to be using this at all times throughout the race. So again, don't skimp on it. I don't want to sit here and spend your money willy-nilly, but again, quality counts in this particular instance. And I'll come to a recommendation in a second as to what you might want to look at. And typically these products are fleece lined or have some kind of insulation liner with them, Primaloft or Primaloft or whatever it might be. And then the next item then for an outer layer is your significant down jacket, pretty well 100% for thermal protection. In most cases, you won't need to be wearing this jacket during progress up the race. I say typically, my experiences of racing in Alaska and both in Alaska and the Yukon, I never wore a thick down jacket at any stage during the race. Now, that just might have been the year I was in, but with the 6683, there hasn't been a race, I don't think, where I haven't seen people wearing a thick down jacket for progression at the race at some stage during the event. But typically it's there for when you stop to bivvy, it's there for when you stop just for a coffee break or whatever it might be. But it's also there for emergency purposes, and it's kind of one of your main survival items that you'll need to ensure that you're going to stay alive in this race, which will be very helpful. Suggested brands, thousands to choose from. Particular favourite of mine from as far as the wind protection is concerned is the Mammut Ultimate Jacket. It's been around for years. It's been modified a few times. But it's just an absolutely superb bomb-proof jacket. Again, there are other brands will do similar things, but that one in particular, I think, is an absolute cracker. And then when you come on to the down products, again, there's loads and loads. The last few years, we were recommending the Rab Positron. Still would recommend the Rab Positron as a good all-round jacket. These aren't your big 8,000 meter jackets whereby that you might use on Summit in Everest. Those would be totally impractical for this event. But these are good jackets that, when coupled with a sleeping bag, when coupled with other layers, will keep you alive should the proverbial hit the. I've mentioned also the 0G, which is 1,000 fill down jacket. That's kind of for the racing snakes. It doesn't give you as much protection as a positron. So if you were to go for something slightly lesser like that, then you really would need to consider a secondary down jacket just to boost it up for when the conditions are really, really bad. Socks, quickly go through these. Three main things to consider here are the liner socks. Hold on, how did that happen? Oh, it doesn't give me a little zippy up and down. I didn't do my links in there, but never mind. So we'll go straight into the whole lot. The liner socks, just simple liner socks are absolutely fine. Thermal ones are probably better than your summer weight ones, but the liner socks are liner sock. As long as the primary thing is to mitigate friction, but also to make sure that moisture is moving away from the foot, so there isn't a buildup of moisture in between toes, etc. As with all these socks, strongly recommend you wear them in. I find that wear them out on the hills, get them wet, find out if there are any seams that are going to rub or anything like that. Just make sure that they are comfortable on you. Mid-layer socks, wool socks are probably my recommendation, but there are some good synthetic socks around as well. But merino wool, absolutely mustard. I should have said that actually for the base layers. Merino wool for base layers is an absolutely amazing product. But wool socks, recommend them. They're the kind of socks that you might wear in the autumn, in the spring and the autumn around here for mountain walking and the like. They're not the thickest, but again, coupled up with a liner sock, they will add a significant amount of warmth or protection for your feet. And then you have the outer layer sock, which again, typically should be wool or can be wool. And I've mentioned here a brand called Lawton, who make a superb Primaloft insulated sock. It's a product you might want to look at. They're bloody expensive. I think they're about 45, 50 quid a pair. But just as a one-off, you may want to consider them. Not so easy to walk around on slippery floors, but that's not what they're designed for. Once they're put into a pair of shoes, they're superb. But again, look at outer layer socks as something that's very, very warm. I also mentioned Horizon, who make a very good, I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's called the Mountain Sock or something like that. And that's got Expedition. It's called Expedition. And that had Primaloft woven into the fabric, again adding a heck of a lot of warmth. I've mentioned here waterproof socks. Now this isn't really a sock that's necessary for the 6633. The only reason why you might want to consider for the 6633 is for its wind protection. So unless I would ignore them completely unless the shoes that you choose, which I'll come on to in a second, being the most comfortable for you, if they are so offer very, very little in the way of any protection from the wind, etc. That's the only reason why I would consider taking waterproof socks. For other races like the Yukon Arctic Ultra and for things like the Adidas Sport, the Invitational, I would certainly consider them because you're quite likely to come across to end up in some overflows, like in a test two on both courses at some stage during the race. So there may be consideration. They're not typically as comfortable as other socks, but if they stop your feet from getting wet, they're a damn good thing. I gave a couple of suggestions there, but again, there's some very good socks out there. Bridgedale, Horizon, Lawton, Dan Tuff, can't remember, Wigwam, I think are very good socks. Like there's loads out there. You have a look around, and if you've got any doubts, just ping me an email. Gloves, following the same kind of pattern. Liner gloves, these don't need to be super expensive or super technical, but simple liner gloves are going to be absolutely fine. Wool ones, silk ones, synthetic ones. There are plenty of options around there. They're typically about 6 to 15 pounds, I guess, is a kind of the range for these. I wouldn't spend any more than that on them, but have quite a few of them. They are, whilst in themselves, they won't actually provide much warmth, but once they're used in conjunction with a secondary sock, a mid-layer glove, they're fantastic. Excuse my spelling, but mid-layer glovers. I'm going to recommend strongly here Power Stretch gloves again. Absolutely flipping magic things. I can't recommend them enough. Power Stretch is your friend out in this Arctic, as far as I'm concerned. And from a gloves perspective, they're fantastic. They allow a lot of dexterity. They provide a lot of warmth. They're worn in conjunction with a liner glove, and absolutely fantastic. You've got a lot of warmth there. The only thing you haven't got, though, is any wind protection. So therefore, I would suggest then at least another pair of gloves or mitts that provide a windproof protection. There are some superb ones out there for that. Arc'teryx makes some. I'm trying to think now. There's Rab makes some photons. I can't remember what they're called now, but I can find the names if you need them. And then finally, your outer mitts. These are your kind of extreme mitts, and these do need to be significantly good. Typically, you'll go for down-filled ones. Down is still better by some margin over synthetic fill. I'd strongly go for down in every case. And I wouldn't worry the fact that don't look at gloves for your outer mitts. Gloves are going to won't offer as much warmth or much protection. And typically, when you're going to be wearing these mitts, it's going to be so bad that you ain't going to be worried about doing anything else but taking the next step and moving forward. So don't worry about the dexterity that you might lose by wearing mitts. Mentioning some brands here. Rab has mentioned again. I keep mentioning Rab. I mention them because one is they do assist us in our race, but that's not a massive plug because of that. But they do have a range that is so flipping spot on for the 6633 and other Arctic races. That if you were to do one stop at one brand, that there isn't a better brand out there. But then you have got things like Arc'teryx that make absolutely superb gloves. I haven't really seen the range recently, but Terra Nova or Xterra, they make some excellent gloves. But there are some, again, good brands out there. Mountain Hardware, Outdoor Research, yeah, superb. Okay, headwear. How long have I been talking? Can I keep going? Yeah, have I? Oh, I'll keep going anyway. Keep going until. Am I right?
Yeah, keep going.
All right, keep going. Headwear. It's going to be warm, windy. You just need to consider all the options available to you. But the kind of things you need to consider: beanie caps with windstop or fleece headband. Can't recommend them enough. Just nice and simple. Headwear. Consider also just make sure that I say make sure, but it'd be useful if they can cover your ears. Or at least a number of your headwear will cover your ears, because it's quite often where you will just want something on your head, but you don't want the tips of your ears or any part of your ears exposed, because it's surprising how much the wind can catch those particular points. Balaclava, flipping obvious. Well, not flipping obvious, but it is obvious. At some stage during the race, you are going to want to have full face coverage with no exposed skin whatsoever. And one logical way to start that process is by wearing a balaclava. The things to consider on there would be be able to breathe through them. Most or a lot of balaclavas, particularly ones called ninja balaclavas, give you a lot of options that whereby you have a face mask that will pull off or rip off to allow easier breathing, or at least have holes in the front that your breath will go through. There are some very swanky balaclavas out there which have got a kind of, I don't even know what they are, but they're like a plastic cover over your face. They look fantastic, but our experience, I can't remember what they're called, but they haven't been as brilliant as they look. But maybe somebody else on here will have other experience or can either back up what they said or counter it. Face mask, oh crikey, yeah, take 3 or 4 or 5 of these things. They do get gunked up very quickly, regardless of whether they have holes in them for breathing in. the amount of the breath can get out isn't enough for it to get rid of everything. So over a very short period of time, let's say over a couple of hours, a lot of gunk, both your breath, snot, all kind of other things will merge in there and will just start freezing. When it starts freezing, then it starts freezing on your face. And we have had cases, quite a few cases, where people's faces have had frost nip or frostbite because of the wearing the face mask, which is frozen on their face, and not realizing that they're actually freezing the skin at the same time. I didn't even click the button to say that, but they were face masks. And then neck gaiter, entirely up to you, but if your other clothing is protecting everything, that's fantastic. But the neck gaiter is such a simple thing, just to stick around your neck and forget about everything else. You never need to worry about that aspect. So if you're wearing base layers that have got zip necks, you're actually still protecting your front of your neck at all times. So worthy consideration. Other considerations, we've got footwear, sleeping systems, cooking systems, storage, miscellaneous. Let's go into footwear. This is obviously a biggie. It's a biggie, but it's actually quite simple, I think. So in order of consideration, I won't say this is the first consideration, although I have put it as the first consideration, is boots or shoes. When we went out to do this race originally, all the locals were aghast that we suggested that we'd be doing this race in running shoes or trail shoes. And I completely get where they're coming from. They were very much used to walking around the hamlet, standing around. I'm not saying this is kind of what they do, but their activity wasn't racing as fast as they possibly can, or at least moving at pace consistently in a forward motion. So shoes or running shoes, I think are a good choice, but it is personal choice. But for most people, I would suggest that shoes is going to be the way to go. But that subject, of course, is first and foremost thing. They have to be comfortable. No matter what recommendation somebody gives to you that you must use this shoe or that shoe, by all means try them out, but don't make them feel comfortable in your mind. They have got to be comfortable. It is absolutely paramount that these shoes must work for you. Also remembering that you are going to be wearing 2, possibly 3 pairs of socks. So your shoe size accordingly needs to be adjusted accordingly. So typically you're likely to be at least 1 shoe size bigger than you might normally wear. I wouldn't go up as far as 2 sizes bigger, primarily because that actually changes the shape of the shoe and where the natural bend in the front of the shoe would normally cut across you. You'd be moving that forward across into your toes and would cause problem itself. But a size up is quite sensible, and maybe even a size and a half. But a size up, I think, as a minimum, or as a kind of benchmark, is a good place to go. Again, I'd be happy for others to chip in due course to tell me I'm right, wrong, or accordingly. But that's what I think. Number 3, equal. Look for thermal qualities after you found the shoe is comfortable. The thermal qualities will come out of 2 things, both from the cold that comes from the ground, thick soles, fantastic. So those inverted commas, what were deemed clown shoes many years ago, Hoka's, for instance, have got very thick soles and thermal soles. So there's a lot of thermal protection. You can also increase the thermal qualities by just putting a simple layer of tin foil between the sole and the sole and the inner sole thing, whatever we call it. And then the other bit of fabric to consider then is what the actual shoe, the top of the shoe, is made of. So things like Gore-Tex, which isn't the product I would recommend typically because it clogs up with moisture for an upper body wear, but your feet won't necessarily sweat as much as that. So things like Gore-Tex is certainly worth considering as it will provide complete and utter wind protection. And finally then grip. Again, this is probably self-explanatory. You're going to be on icy conditions, snowy conditions, and therefore you are going to need some form of grip. However, it's surprising that it doesn't necessarily have to be that slippery. Although in the case of the 6633, where you're on ice roads for a lot of the way, you can actually walk along them quite happily with just normal shoes on to the greatest degree. But you certainly will need some grip for going on some of the descents off Right Pass and down into McPherson, and certainly on other races on the Yukon Arctic Ultra. There are plenty of hills there where you can be slip sliding down into Braeburn, across from Carmack's, going over to Carmack's. Again, that's another place where it can get very, very up and down, and some good grip is no bad thing. And another thing to consider for footwear are Neos, and I think there's going to be a question about Neos in a second. I can't remember what the question is, so I might answer it now, but I can't remember what it was. Now Neos are big over boots that will you just with your shoes on, you step into them, and you just basically buckle them up around your feet. They look very cumbersome, but I used mine for 300 plus miles in Yukon Arctic Ultra the 1 year. And I never took them off. They were just absolutely superb. But for the 6633, the benefits of the Neos is they are waterproof. We don't necessarily have that much problem with any exposure to water. And the other thing that was good with them is that they have got, because they are an overboot, they've got a fairly big footprint. So actually, they acted a little bit like a snowshoe on some of the softer snow. I won't say they were superb in that respect, but I'm sure they assisted a fair bit. And then finally as well, then other consideration are ice grips, spikes, very simple things. They're just simple spikes. You just stick them over your shoes on the most icy of conditions. Again, these are things that in some cases, I know people have put them on at the start of the ice road and walk the whole distance with them. I don't know you necessarily need to do that, but they're just simple grids that just stick over your feet with either twisted iron or spikes accordingly. And again, suggested brands, you've got, I just say Hoka Trail shoes and boots, a place to start. But beyond that, you just look. There's plenty of options that will fit the bill. Sleeping system, sleeping bag. Now then, this is an item. Don't skimp on the quality. Don't think I've seen a fantastic bag for £200. If it's £200 and that's its full price, it's only worth £200. It ain't going to be good enough. I know you shouldn't value rate products necessarily on this value, but it's pretty well indicative that it isn't going to be up to much. You are going to need to spend some serious money on this, or buy one secondhand off eBay, or scrounge one, or whatever it might be. But don't skimp on the quality that you actually use in the race. Down, in my opinion, on this particular item is far, far, far better than synthetic. I've seen some synthetic bags that have been rated to some very good levels. I remember sleeping in a Mammut one that was rated to -35. I slept in an ice rink in Paddy Crossing, and I bloody froze, and that was inside. So I don't rate synthetic as much as down. So to go for down, not say wherever possible, just go for down in the story. The quality of the fill is going to be 800 plus fill. I don't know that there would be a bag of any lesser quality that would be suitable to the kind of temperatures that you're likely to experience. And the minimum suitable is going to be about -35 degrees. Suggested brands again: Rab make them, Marmot make them, Mountain Hardware make them, North Face make a good one. I can't think that actually there's not many about, but those brands will all make suitable bags down to the kind of temperatures you're going to be experiencing. Biggie now, bivvy or tent. Personally, I never even considered a tent when I was doing these races. I always used a bivvy. And to that extent, I got into a very, very good system in my bivvy. And I can't think that I would ever swap it or even recommend anything other until I started seeing people using tents in more recent years out on 6633. As mentioned at the outset, I love my kit. So if I ever do get my backside and do another race, just for the purpose of buying another tent, I could be tempted to go with a tent rather than a bivvy. But beyond that, they're both, I think both have got their merits. The pros and cons to both, the significance being that the bivvy is so easy to pitch and dismantle. I was typically, from the time I stopped being inside my sleeping bag and ready to sleep, would be about 2 minutes, and it would take me, I timed it at about 11 minutes to pack up and go. That's my records. I've actually seen people, I'm pretty sure it was Mark and Haley, I think. I saw them do it actually quicker than that, which was about the only thing they ever did that was better than what I used to do. And then, but tents, this is where I do get where I do get a little bit jealous. The tents, what I loved about them, what always put me off was just being the pain in the ass of setting them up. But I've seen people using them and putting up these tents very, very quickly. And the thought of maybe it takes a minute or two longer, but they can get inside the tent, they can sit down, they can move around, they can change their clothing a lot easier. There's a lot of benefits to tents. Yeah, as of today, I'd probably still go with a bivvy, but if you're testing and you want to buy some nice kit, have a look at the tents. So suggested brands, bivvies, outdoor research, Terra Nova, again Rab, again I'm mentioning. Tents, I know Rab make a superb tent. And when I see these tents, these are single skin tents, usually 1 or 2 man. They're not big, massive things at all. They are things that they will just pitch up within seconds. North Face, I'm not sure whether Mountain Hardware still make one, but they certainly used to make one that would be suitable. Continuous sleeping system, sleeping mats, 2 options, and I would suggest you go for one of each. A foam mat, this is something that you would throw on the ground straight away. This all forms part of the system. This is now, maybe come on to that now in a second, but it all comes part of the system whereby when you stop, you throw your foam mat out, and that's your first element of protecting your kit, but also providing some warmth for you or stop you from getting cold. And then the second one then is an inflated mat. So again, these are usually super lightweight. They pack up very, very small, easy to use, store, fold up with your sleeping bag, etc. And they are probably, their thermal protection is even greater than a foam mat. Suggested brands, again, look at Thermarest. They do them all. They're probably one of the most respected brands out there, but there are others. Right, with this now, as with all the systems, your sleep arrangement, you need to practice and hone it. I mentioned it took me 2 minutes one way and 11 minutes to pack up. When I first tried to do this, it took me 40 minutes to set up, and it took me 1 hour and 20 minutes to pack up. That's not good enough. You're going to get cold. You're going to get in hell of a state. Practice this. This is something you can do at home. In the 2 months before the race, just practice the sleeping systems. And then the suggested the system would be to have the bivvy and the inflatable mat and sleeping bag all combined as one item so that it can roll up and fold up onto your sled accordingly. Cooking systems, options here, gas, multi-fuel, solid fuel. Gas stove, that's my preferred choice. It's not what most people would recommend for Arctic conditions, but most people are not recommending are not considering the racing aspect of this race or the style of people or motion that people are using. If you're going to use your stove, you're using it probably, I won't say as an emergency, but as a you wouldn't do it out of choice. If you've got to stop to light your stove and do all the rest of it, then you're wasting time by not moving forwards. So you're only really going to use stove as an emergency system, or very, very unlikely to use it. You can manage your ways in getting your food and hydration, all the rest of it, without having to resort to a stove. So if you do need to use one, as long as you look after the gas and stop from getting cold, which again, as part of a little system, it's easy. You either light a match, flick the button on the gas stove, and you're away to go straight away. Multi-fuel stoves, they're bomb-proof nearly. Mine broke on the Yukon Arctic from the first day. That's stuff for the rest of the race. And they're also a factor used when in race mode, my humble opinion. Solid fuel, it's not an option really as your primary cooking system. It's too much hassle and too much work involved, but it's a very sensible option, or you might want to consider it as a backup option accordingly. Food, hot food, freeze-dried is very easy to use. You just add hot water to a bag, leave it hydrate, and then basically eat it. It's so simple, usually high in calories. I'm probably not at this point in time going to recommend anything different to that. But you couple that with a food flask, or just flask in any case. You can then have hot food at any time during the race, whenever you like, basically. And then finally on food, trail food, make sure everything is bite-sized. So if you buy bars of chocolate in Whitehorse, don't leave them as a bar of chocolate, because when you go to bite them, they'll break your teeth. So if you do things like that, cut them into bite size and put them into a bag as trail mix, so that when you want a piece of chocolate, a bit of Mars bar, you just pick out a small chunk, stick in your mouth, and you're sucking on it rather than chewing on it to get the benefit or the flavor accordingly. And then make sure you have the containers and bags which are easily accessed with mitts on. So putting all your bags, all your food trail mix into things like water bottles, normal water bottles, and then drinking the food is no bad thing. Having them big freezer bags is also not a bad thing. Anything whereby you can get your big mix into it and get it to your face, fantastic. And there is a system involved in that as well, but we won't go into that now. And then have plenty of variety. The thing that we noticed a lot, or I've noticed a lot, is that sometimes you crave cold things, sometimes you crave sweet things, sometimes you crave savory things. Have a mixture of both and have both on hand to meet that craving. Storage, your sled bag. It's obviously, you haven't got to have a sled bag that can't hold everything, but you'll see a lot of the sleds being used have got a simple big sled bag. Fantastic. It means that nothing should blow away as long as everything's contained in there. Very easy to strap down. It's a very simple, easy system. Highly recommend it. Dry bags. Paul talked about dry bags and putting all his kit into different things. Again, absolutely agree with him. Different coloured dry bags. Put your spare clothes into one. Put your kitchen system into another. Whatever you want to do, just sort out the systems, but put them into bags that you know the colour of them means certain things. Thermos flasks. This is just again part of management. Whenever you come to a checkpoint, you'll be able to get hot water. If you put hot water into your thermos flask and have 2 or 3 thermos flasks carrying maybe anything up to about 9 litres of water, then fantastic. You never need to stop to make water. 9 litres should get you even on the longest stages of a damn long way down the course. So just from a management point of view, have some thermos flasks on your sled. Insulation sleeves, pockets, bags, again from the same as thermos flask, but things like you can for storage of your batteries, your gas canisters, again anything like that. Again, you can make them yourselves. You can custom make them. You can buy posh ones if you so like, but just make sure you keep things like gas and your batteries as warm as possible. Now going to miscellaneous. I really am rattling on now a little bit. Bothies. These are just a single skin that you just stick over your head. The design usually to be worked with 2 people or 4 people or 6 people accordingly, just so your body will stretch the body out. But don't worry about that. Even as a single person, a bothy is very, very useful. If you need to get out of the wind in an emergency, to change a damp top because you've been sweating too much, to change a pair of socks because you got a bit, you feel a hot spot coming on. Fantastic. You get into a bothy, put it over your head. It flaps around all over the place, but at least you're being protected from the wind whilst you do any clothes changes or whatever it might be. Lighters, matches. I'm not going to stop there. We'll just go over that windproof ones, obviously. Goggles and sunglasses, absolutely to both. You will need sunglasses. You will need goggles. If you are out to buy new ones of these particular items, I would suggest that you go for the photochromic ones that go from that lighten as it gets darker, etc. Only because goggles and sunglasses are useful eyewear both at night time and during the daytime accordingly. So if you just go for ones that got dark glasses and dark goggles, you just might find them a little bit darker at night time. Not impossible, but might so. But if you are buying new ones, just consider that item. Head torch, torches, beacons. Yep, you're going to need head torch for sure. Strongly recommend you go for battery powered head torch. And I also strongly, not the rechargeable ones, because you obviously can't have good access to rechargeable battery or to recharge them. But battery powered ones, and also ideally have a remote battery pack. There's not many brands that are doing these particular at the moment. But I think Black Diamond do. I think Silver do. Surprisingly, Petrol don't, unless they bought out a new one in the last year or so that I haven't seen. But strongly recommend you go for something that's got normally works on normal batteries and has got a remote battery pack. Clicking the wrong button. Hold on, there, start again. That's better. Hydration pack. nice simple system, easy to drink from, and so on and so forth. Stick it on your back, make sure it's insulated. Pipe goes under your arm, make sure the pipe is insulated, and then you can just have the nozzle come out by your mouth and you can drink accordingly. Sometimes it does get blocked up with ice. You'll come into a habit of, and practice it, is to always blow back down the tube every time you drink, so that the tube is free of any excess water that's going to freeze up between slurps, and it will freeze up bloody quickly. So let's move on. Backpack, you don't necessarily need one, but if you have a system whereby you want to have provide some insulation to the water, you might want to carry your heavyweight down jacket in there just to give a bit of protection for the water. And you might want to hold your battery pack for your head torch in there as well. It's not essential, but it's a system I've used in the past and I quite liked it. People have used a similar system, but just used the bag between the poles on their sled. Walking poles, strongly recommend them myself. If you're anti-walking poles, which sometimes the Brits are, most other countries are a little bit more kind of open-minded, but I'd try them before you dismiss them. I think they're bloody brilliant. I can't remember who it was. There's only one person I've heard who said they hated them. Pretty well everyone else says absolutely love them. So if you haven't tried walking poles, try them. Tools, knives, multi-tools, whatever race you're doing, there's going to be times when you want to cut something, stab something, or turn something, whatever like that. So yeah, a multi-tool will probably cover all those aspects. But if it's in the case of like the 6633 where you might have a wheel system, make sure you've got tools to sort out wheels and so on and so forth. First aid kit. You can start off by buying one off the shelf, but then after that you might want to consider things like what tablets you might want to take with you that might work for you, whether that be, I'm not the medical person, but things like ibuprofen, things like Modium and stuff like that. If you've got any particular blister packs that you particularly like to use, consider that. There's lots of options there, but make it personal to you and make sure it all works. And finally, the sled. Again, this is a hard one to where you start in this. The easy option for a lot of people is simply to go to a company like Snow Sled and buy the whole setup from them directly. It's bloody expensive, but it's easy. They work. They're fantastic, and so on and so forth. It's just value for money. I think they're quite a lot of money. I think you can, if you're of a mind to do your own, you can quite easily make your own sled. You can certainly buy the sled off them, which in itself is very, very good. And then you can add your own wheel system. So these downhill karting wheels, whatever they call skateboard things, wheels are fantastic. And then poles and so on and so forth. They're all very easy to make. It depends how ambitious you want to be. But I wouldn't dismiss anything. But for the 6633, you will need wheels. The first 120 miles of the race will just wreck your sled because it's on the Dempster Highway. After that, it's not so bad for the next 180 odd miles, and you probably get to attack without wheels, but it's questionable. Weight-wise, don't worry too much about weight within reason, because once these sleds are moving, whether it be on snow, ice, or on wheels, once they start moving, the weight is mitigated quite a lot by the motion. Words of wisdom, just the last little bit. Just don't skimp on your kit and clothing. I used to say this when we used to sell all the kit, and I used to feel very guilty because people might think I'm trying to sell them something. I'm not. It's basically your kit and clothing is a massive, massive part of the adventure. It's part of how you're going to, whether you're going to succeed or not. And just make sure you know how it works. So everything you've got to know how it works. So I mean, my bugbears I've seen in the past. I haven't seen it recently because I always say this to everybody. I don't want to see people turn up the start line with their stove still in their box. What a bloody waste of time. So you've got to learn how to use the stove. Get outside in the rain, in the snow, in the wind, and make yourself a cup of coffee. Do it a couple of times in the month leading up to the race. Get to know how miserable it can be to try and boil some water. Just practice and practice it. Just practice. Think about what you need to open. Things like your sled bag. Put some big pieces of ribbon on there, some rope on the zips, so you can grab hold of them easily with your big mitts on. Very, very simple. Just crack on, and make sure you can make sure everything works in that respect. And your shoes, make sure they fit. Obviously, when you're running around with your normal one pair of running shoes, socks on, they may be a bit clumpy, but practice with 2 pairs of shoes on, make sure they fit, make sure they're not too tight, and make sure there's no blister points and so on and so forth. There's loads of other tips to share as well. But the main things I would say is test your kit. Make sure you know it inside out. It is vital. And then practice all your systems. Practice cooking, as I mentioned, go outside. Practice your sleeping system, getting out of your bivvy. Do it in front of the telly whilst Coronation Street's on, whatever you like. A lot of people can think about this race as a very physical event, but the physical side of it is only 1/3 of the aspect of the element of actually finishing it. The other third is your mental tenacity. And we haven't touched on that today, but you need to work on your mental attitude and mental learning how to suffer. I can talk about that at another time. And then finally, it's your kit. All these are the third elements. Third is physical, third is mental, and the third is your kit. You've got to know how your kit works and what to do when it doesn't work. And then say, just to remind you, the Arctic it's a horrible environment. It's not, it's a beautiful environment, but it can sneak up on you and it can royally bite you on the bum. So, although you might have a plan, and I know Paul mentioned he had a plan when he does the race. Everybody has a plan when they do the race, but you've got to be prepared and accepting of the fact that that plan is pretty well guaranteed not to work. Not because of your ill preparations, because a curveball will be thrown your way in some way or other. So always be prepared and have other plans as backup. Never panic. There's always a way out of everything, but do have your plans B, C, D, F, and G, and so on up your sleeve. These are all things that I used to consider when I was out wobbling on the mountains in the middle of the night, and I used to keep thinking of things that could go wrong and how I would get out of it.
So panel, a couple of questions for you. Just jump in when you want to answer these. First question from Heather was, generally what percentage of the race is walking versus running?
I would say 100% walking. I know Dave Berridge in his book and articles talks about running. It depends what you call running. It depends what you call walking. Technically, I suppose running is when both feet are off the ground, but to all intents and purposes, I think everybody yomps it or walks it.
I tend to agree with that.
I'd have Martin agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm on there now, but I tend to agree with that. It's not so much because of the distance, because there are people who can run some incredible distances, but because of the way you manage yourself. When you run, you are more typically likely to sweat, and then that is counterproductive in so many other ways to being successful in this race. So part of your management of your body and your kit and your clothing, running seems to be out of the question. I think in all the years, there's only one person who I could remotely say did, two. I can say did a lot of running. One would be Alicia, but she got severe frostbite by the time she got to Nunavik and had to be pulled out of the race. And the other one was, I can't remember his name, Sam Hawkins, who ran from checkpoint to checkpoint. I've never seen him sweat so much in all my life, but it was an incredibly mild year. And in any other year, that year was very mild. Any other year,
it would have been bad.
No chance, not a chance.
Even Sam, Martin, I know Sam well. Sam will tell you that for 6 months after, he had a cold weather injury on his legs. So he ran with basically running tights, as you say, ran from checkpoint to checkpoint, and then crashed out for a few hours. It was a classic hare and tortoise that year, wasn't it? Where Natalie walked at a very fast walking pace, Sam ran, and they kept on leapfrogging each other all the way through the race.
Great. Another question from Heather was, on average, how much sleep do competitors stop to take? And are they in short amounts?
Well, for me, it was 19 hours. 19 hours in 9 days, so just over 2 hours. But some of that is a 20-minute power nap. Some of that is an hour. I think the most I had was 3, maybe 3.5 in one go. If I stopped to bivvy out, it would only be for an hour.
Yeah. So when you're out on the ice road, an hour when you're in some of the harder checkpoints, getting your head down for a bit more time.
Yeah.
I think from my point of view, my kind of strategies have changed over the more races I've done. I struggle to sleep at any of the checkpoints in the 6633, particularly as, of course, the athletes who have DNF tend to follow the races up, and checkpoints can get very busy and very noisy, and people aren't always as good as they might be with keeping the volume down. So I tend not to sleep at checkpoints very well, and I tend to do 48 hours or best part of straight out in races now, trying not to have a sleep. Johnny's not listening, so I can talk about that kind of stuff and the hallucinations, which are amazing, and it might not be the right thing to do, but frankly, they're to be experienced, in my humble opinion. And then crash out for a few hours and then go again for another sort of 36 hours, trying to always be competing, walking during daylight hours, never sleeping during daylight hours, because I think the daylight hours for me are to be cherished. So just sleeping when you have to, and in my case, a big chunk for me I slept a lot more in the 6633. In fact, I had probably a good 6 hours sleep the first 2 nights, but then gradually slept less and less as the kind of pain and discomfort kicked in. So I probably ended up with, I don't know, I'm guessing about 20, just over 20 hours overall. But the 6633, when I last did it, the 300 miles, I slept for about 15 hours. I had 2 chunks of 6 hours and one of 3 over 6.5 days. But it's just kind of horses, I think. Some people like to have a proper kip every night. Some people like to push on and just sleep when they have to. Some people power up, and kind of others don't.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that. Any others? Okay. The last. Go on, Vlad.
Sorry.
Go on.
For me, sleeping, I think it's one of the 4 important things in the race. In the short race, in the first year when I participated, if I'm not mistaken, I slept 1 hour at the first checkpoint. So I finished the race in 35 hours and a half with 1 hour of sleep. Then in the next year, in the first 192 kilometers, in the first 2 days, I didn't sleep at all. So I went continuously. I remember Martin coming at one point. I was trying to sleep on the road, but couldn't. And Martin came because it was dangerous. And I continued to walk. And then at checkpoint, I slept McPherson. At McPherson, I slept, I think, 4 hours, and then went to the ice road. And then on the ice road, I don't remember how many hours I slept. It was critical for me.
Would you say the lack of sleep played an impact on your race then, Vlad?
A lot, yes, because the hallucinations were heavier. The negative things in my mind were stronger. The cold made a lot of a big mark on me, and I remember arguing with Scott because he wanted to get me in the car, and I didn't want to get in the car. And then I remember Martin and Scott coming and pulling me off the race, and I was telling them, no, I will jump from the car. I stop the car. I have to go back. So you need to practice the lack of sleep. I think you have to go out and train and sleep and see how your body will react.
The final question from Heather was, and we've heard a lot about kit already and layers, etc. But are there any tips from anyone on keeping warm? So those funny things you found just that helped.
I know a lot of people use hand warmers and also feet warmers accordingly. I only speak for myself. I'm not a big fan of them myself, but I think I'm very much in the minority in saying that. But they're just simple pads that you shake up, and whatever the chemical reaction is, it just means it's a warm pad that lasts about 8 hours or so. As I say, I don't like them. I used to find that my hands were getting too sweaty when using them, but a lot of people do use them. So I know certainly that's been very helpful. And the other thing I'll just say about keeping warm as well, I can't remember, somebody said it, it might have been Johnny, I'm not sure, but one bit of advice which I recommend to everybody is the whole of the race, you pretty much must do the whole race on the cold side of comfortable. So whatever's comfortable temperature-wise in your body, you just want to be just a little bit behind that and on the cold side. So when you're working up that hill, for instance, up towards the airfield from the start line, a lot of people have got the adrenaline pumping, and they'll try and power their way up there. You can see somebody 100 meters ahead of you. I want to catch that bugger and all the rest of it. You've got to switch that all off. You've got to just get into your own selfish mode, and you've got to do the race your own way. And part of that is managing your temperature. And I say on the basis of, I would always try and stay on the cold side of comfortable.
If I may add something now, I've never done an ultra marathon in the Arctic, but I did a fair share of winter camping and other type 2 fun stuff in the Arctic in all seasons. And I would say it's super important to be proactive about maintaining your body temperature. So don't get dressed when you're already miserable. Get dressed when you feel like you're getting there. And the same goes for eating and drinking. Like dehydration is one of the main contributing factors to hypothermia. So I think just staying on top of your well-being. And of course, one of the early symptoms of hypothermia is also cloudy judgment. So it's just super important to be a step ahead of your body in terms of noticing that you are not warm enough, that you need more layers. There is, I would say, I mean, of course, this race requires a fair share of sucking things up, but in terms of keeping your body warm, there shouldn't be any sucking up. Like you should be constantly monitoring yourself and adjusting accordingly, because it's way easier to stay warm than to get warm after you get very, very cold.
Yeah, Steve Evans is still on you. Steve is probably the one of the best people I've ever seen at managing his temperature and his pace. He was metronomic in how he did the race the very first year. It was exemplary how he did it, particularly as the first year was a learning curve and there wasn't as much information around as there is now. But the way he managed his layering and taking clothes on and off when needed to, as opposed to, oh, I can do it in 10 minutes, I'll do it when I get to the checkpoint, I'll do this. He was exceptionally good in that. Whether he wants to say, I'm sure he's not shy. But Steve, you're very welcome to chip in with your thoughts.
Yeah, I will chip in. Thanks, Martin. That was very complimentary. I think I suffered both on the Yukon Arctic Ultra and on the 6633, but I think a couple of people have said the thing to do is be bothered. It's not to ignore the little things, it's to pay attention to the detail. And if you think about something, you have to deal with it there and then. So if you're starting to get warm and starting to sweat, you need to take a hat off and zip a layer, change your clothing. Take your big mitts off so you can lose heat through your hands. And it's about managing it and, running. I don't mean running because I never run. In all the races that I've done, I am definitely back of the pack, slow, steady pace. And it's about keeping your temperature slightly cold. So you're not thinking, God, I'm warm. You're thinking, oh, I'm a little bit cold, and if I was sat at home watching the telly, I'd probably turn the heating up or stick a jump. 3 French guys that were on the race the first year with us, they ran into real problems with sweating, didn't they? They were just destroyed, and the 3 of them dropped out because they excess sweat, basically.
Yeah. I kind of touched on it when I talked about the kit, but things like there are some gorgeous Gore-Tex waterproof jackets that people can buy with flashy colours and all the rest of it. I won't say they're not a lot of use out in the Arctic. They don't breathe well enough. So I know certainly you're talking about the first year with the Frenchman. It was Francis walking down the ice road, and I can remember he was cold. He wanted to get out the race. I remember him unzipping his Gore-Tex jacket and literally opening it up, and he was just a case of ice.
On his skin, wasn't it?
All
on his skin.
All the moisture from his body had been stopped because the Gore-Tex had clogged it. So that's no good. I mean, he was sweating a lot, but it was literally an absolute case of ice inside him. So, and then with the case of Gerard, who was pulled out the race at the very start, what I mentioned about face masks, he'd been breathing into his face mask constantly. It had built up moisture that had frozen. It had moved around his face mask accordingly. He didn't know about it. It was only when he took his face mask off, and suddenly it was my eyes were wide open because the whole of the side of his cheek had gone white and marbly, which is basically not good. And so he was out of the race on day one before he even got to Arctic Circle, and a very, very experienced racer. So management is very, very important, but the systems you employ need to get moisture away from your body. You can't afford to work hard during the day because it's nice and sunny, get sweaty, and then because that once that's wet, it won't dry. It will not dry out there. Once it gets wet, the only way it's going to go is to freeze. And once it freezes, and once you get into nighttime, you're kind of on the down spiral.
Yeah, Scott, you've got a lot of experience dealing with cold injury, and just working with you last year, watching you deal with people with varying degrees of frostbite or frost nip or that kind of stuff. What advice could you give around, not just keeping warm, but preventing that cold injury bit?
So it's pretty much been covered in reality. So taking it from inside out, your body heats from the inside out, and it heats through food. That food then gives you the energy to generate heat through the muscles. So it goes inside out. So you need to layer, and as Martin said, to keep the warm side of cool. If you sweat, that has to come out and go somewhere. If it's cold, it will then freeze on you. So what you need to do is have a system whereby you're constantly fueling, because if you don't fuel, you will then burn through your glycogen stores, through your fat stores, you'll get cold. Layer appropriately for your movements. So earlier on, someone said have a big down for stopping. So just be warm over cool, just enough to be comfortable, not cold when you're moving, depending on the pace and the heat you're generating. Layer and make sure you're hydrated. And all of those things, so all those drills were spoken about today and tonight, all of those things will keep you in effect at the optimum temperature to perform. The one other thing is sleep. Sleep deprivation makes you fatigued, which means you use more calories, which means you run hotter. So again, it's a decision how much sleep you can do without to work optimally. But in essence, all the basics were covered tonight. Fueling, hydration, layering for the conditions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Scott. Right, we had some other submitted questions. Emma. Hello, Emma. You submitted some questions to us. So I'll get those up now. The first question was about bivvy or tent.
I know I gave my view, which was I don't know. And one thing that convinced me, actually, Johnny convinced me with a tent he had, a particular tent he had. And if you're a bit nerdy like me and you like looking at gear reviews and stuff, have a look at the MSR tent. I can't remember what it's called. It's a single skin tent. And the guy that does a promo video for it stands on an upside down bucket and assembles a tent. And it is such an incredibly clever design of tent. It has basically, you keep the two cross pieces swivel and they go into dead ends. So all you have to do is put them into two loops, if that makes sense. And it will assemble as quick as your average person will assemble a bivvy system. And that's convinced me to use a tent. The only real argument for bivvies is that they're lighter and they're quicker. And if you can get over those two, and this bivvy, the MSR tent, I think is virtually the same weight as your average bivvy bag, and takes virtually no extra time to assemble. So that's absolutely convinced me. And I think technology is continually moving. And I forget the name of it, but the MSR tent, which I've just bought and have yet to test. I've assembled it a few times, but I've yet to sleep in it. It looks absolutely amazing.
The TNF Assault 2 is similar to the MSR one. So
Okay.
it's a choice between which one you want, but they're both single wall and they'll both work effectively because of the cold. I think the big decision for tent versus bivvy is in a tent you can move about, you can derobe, you can cook. In a bivvy, you're dependent on that weather outside being comfortable. So I think it's for the decision wise, because weight wise, they're coming close to each other now. The single wall tents are about 1.5 kilos.
Can I chip in? I think it depends to a large extent on your race strategy. And whenever I've raced, I've tried to go from checkpoint to checkpoint without really sleeping. And my bivvy was there for sort of not emergencies, but if I was really struggling and I needed an hour's sleep. I think the first time when I did the 66-33, I think I only slept out twice. And one of those was disastrous. I spent 2 hours in my bivvy bag and slept for about 20 minutes and I gave up in the end. And I think that was the long stretch leading up to Swimming Point. What's that, about 70 odd miles? 26 hours. I spent 2 hours in a bivvy bag and they were the most miserable 2 hours of my life. And the caravan at Swimming Point wasn't much better. So I think it depends on your race strategy, and if you're prepared to give it a go and go from checkpoint to checkpoint, and you've just got something where you could sleep should an emergency happen, then I think I'd go for a bivvy. It's the only experience I've got. The tents weren't there when I was racing 10 years ago, whenever it was, even longer.
Yeah, I used the bivvy, and I remember walking on the ice road, and it was so cold that I had to carve with my pot a cave in the snow, and I put my pulk on top of the hole. So when Johnny came or Stuart came, we made a joke, and they saw that everything is okay. So I slept very good in that hole, but my clothes got wet, my tent got wet, and I had to sleep the second night on the ice road. So that was the critical point when Scott and Martin took me out of the race. So, and about the last question about the cold, it was so cold that I shit my pants and I had to pee. And, I mean, no joke, really, because it was so cold and my hands, I couldn't take off my gloves and shit and make food. So I ate like, I didn't eat 24 hours at all on the ice road. And I remember Scott coming with the car and I didn't saw them passing me because I was only having a little crack in my jacket, in my down jacket, and I only saw my feet. And I just had to embrace the cold and go with it as a friend. So you must practice, Emma, BV, sleeping outside, but you can't practice the cold that you will find at Arctic.
Another part of your question, Emma, was about avoiding needing to blow up the thermarest each time you want to snooze. And has anyone used the Pitarac Arctic bedding system?
I must admit, I've never heard of the Pitarac bedding system until this email came through earlier today. But I did look it up, and it pretty much describes the system that we'd recommend anyway. It's just made it into let's say a commercial form, I would say, for want of a better word. Suggestion of how you set your bivvy up would be your bivvy, your sleeping bag, and your blow-up mat would be one combined unit, which is pretty much how the Pitarac system, from what I've seen, works. Now, and then I would put that then on top of a foam mat then to protect both the products and to add extra warmth. I don't think the Pitarac system, I think it's perfect. I think it should have been called the liking system because I designed that about 20 years ago. But I think it's doing what I'd say is logical, a very good way of doing it. But whether I don't really know. The only thing I'd say about the Pitarac system, I don't know what the fabric is on the outside of the system. The only thing I could see, it was the way it was described. It sounds like that it's a system that you then drag into a tent rather than sleep outside straight away. In which case, then I don't think then that's as effective. That's kind of doubling up on something you don't need to do. So I'd either go for a system whereby what I suggest, bivy bag with your sleeping bag already rolled out and the blow-up mat underneath it, and then and the system there, because even the Pitarac system, although you say you don't want to be blowing up a mat and it's fat, I totally agree with that. But even the Pitarac system suggests that you have the mat to blow up underneath you anyway, from what I can see. And I don't know how you're gonna how you would avoid that if you use a blow-up mat. So I kind of, yeah, if you were to turn up on the start line with the Pitarac system, I wouldn't be laughing at you. But I don't know that what already exists and the way you can adapt your own systems wouldn't work equally as well. I'd love to see it in action, and then I wouldn't say I'd change my mind. I'm not recommending you don't go with it. I just don't know what is offering that isn't already there without having to spend $125 or whatever it is.
Emma, you also asked about music and listening to music on the run, and then the battery charging that goes with it, and whether people use solar panel chargers like Goal Zero. Thank you.
Yeah, I took an iPod with me, and I think I only used it on the ice road. So yeah, the Dempster is a little bit too dangerous for that. I enjoyed it mainly because I had an hour or two off from Haley in my ear. No, honestly, it's a good distraction. It's a really good distraction, but charging is the issue. So I didn't take a solar panel. I charged it at the checkpoints, but if you couldn't charge it, then you just couldn't charge it. That's just the way it is. So it did run out at times, and it's something you shouldn't rely on. It's a luxury. It's a nice to have. It's a distraction, but don't rely on it because it's not always going to be there. Same with any electronic devices, be that your GPS watch or navigation device. You know, mine ran out various times. I had a power pack that froze, so you can't rely on these things. So they're great to have. It's great to know where you are from the checkpoint, or great to have your music, but you're gonna have to suck it up sometimes and just go with nature.
On the race.
I tried, I wanted to, but I gave up even with Bluetooth earpieces. My balaclava, my headgear, whatever, was just interfering. I just frankly scrapped it after my first attempt. I have used in terms of charges, I have been quite successful with. I take multiple battery packs out with me in what do you call it, drop bags and on Polk, and keeping one permanently on my body. My experience of battery packs and so on is that if they're turned off, they tend to be safest. When you then turn them on, you then need to keep them warm, of course. So as soon as you turn that battery pack on, and I've used GPS watches and used them continuously for several days, charging on the move with a battery pack, and they've been good as gold. But yeah, by keeping the battery pack in your pocket. So just the standard battery packs that you buy, pre-charge them, and then perhaps charge them, top them up at a checkpoint when you can.
I made a conscious decision whenever I raced not to take any music. I was concerned about the weight of all the spare batteries and stuff. And not everybody knows, I live in Guernsey and training opportunities are, shall we say, limited. So I got used to the boredom because I used to drag my tyre up and down a beach that was half a mile long, and I do 8-hour stretches on the beach. So you get used to seeing the same thing again and again and again. And I think that stood me in really good stead for the ice road, where it was just white the whole time, and I just used to disappear into my hallucinations, you know, and I did hallucinate really, really badly. So all sorts of things. And so music was unnecessary.
I just want to thank you all for coming along here. Veronica, thank you from the other side of the world. Oh, near it, damn it. And Natasha, I don't know if Natasha's still there, I can't see. But really appreciated you giving up half your working day to be here. And then likewise, similarly, Paul, Mark, Johnny's gone, Scott, and Stuart for hosting it. And with respect to any of what we've talked about today, there was nothing that was said that I would strongly disagree with in any way, but there are lots and lots of ways of doing everything, from your training to looking after yourself and so on and so forth. That's kind of adventure for you as well if you're about to participate in the race, to learn those for yourselves. But no, I'm very appreciative for those that contributed, and
it's been lovely.
And wherever your adventures take you, for everyone who joined in, good luck with it all.
2020. 380 miles, 66.3 Arctic Ultra. Grant, a legend. Way! Now it's time for a well-earned rest.
Well done, mate. Absolutely brilliant.